What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And joining me to do just that is Justin Boone. Boone, what's going on, buddy?
Man, we were commiserating a little bit before the show here about some of the teams that we have where we got a lot of injuries. We're going to talk about some of those players today. I have one team that I was telling you about that is absolutely decimated. I feel like I have every single injured player on that roster, and it's a charity league, Harmon. I'm trying to win money for charity, and there's just nothing I can do here, right? So that's the way it goes sometimes for fantasy. But overall, feel like I had a really good week. Really happy with where the rankings ended up. I'm excited to see the expert accuracy contest gets updated come Tuesday, because I think I did well this week. And yeah, we're just getting to that point now where we're starting to hone in. Things are getting a little tighter. We're starting to figure out who the players are who are going to actually help propel us to fantasy championships and who we might want to be giving up on. And I'm feeling a little spicy today, Harmon. I'm feeling like there's a lot of guys that we could be putting in the coping corner. So I'm excited to go through these names.
Good. I'm finally ready for some spicy Boone. I'm ready, buddy. Honestly, there's some players that I feel like we should retroactively put in the coping corner, but people aren't sending them in as panic submissions. So we might have to do that exercise at some point here, but we don't have time to do it today because we have an absolutely packed show here today. You guys, I said on the show yesterday, bring it when it comes to submissions. You guys absolutely brought it to the panic meter. Here's how this goes. If you are unfamiliar, first two segments, that's where we go through your submissions to the people's panic meter. A lot of emails, just a few social submissions this week as well. Then the last two segments, that's where we dive into the waiver wire because injuries are everywhere. Things are happening. Chaos is afoot. So we have some waiver wire selections brought to you by the great Justin Boone over there. I'm not emotionally ready to put Tucker Kraft off my fantasy rosters, but I do know that I need to make some pickups here that will absolutely not fill the gap in, but I'm hoping that Boone can help us in those final two segments. But with that, let's waste no more time. Let's fire up the post-week 9 People's Panic Meter.
Would you say it's time for everyone to panic? Yes, I would, Kent.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening! No! Wait! Everybody stay calm! Stay calm! What's the procedure? Stay calm!
The Panic Meter is presented by Dentech, protecting your teeth from fantasy stress, one matchup at a time. Reminder, folks, we have 4 tiers in the People's Panic Meter. We've got no panic, some panic, total panic, and coping corner. Speaking of the coping corner, this is the state of the coping corner right now. We've got Calvin Ridley, Isaiah Pacheco, TJ Hawkinson, Tony Pollard, Travion Henderson, Justin Fields, and Alvin Kamara. Man, Kamara did not make us regret throwing him into the coping corner last week. That is for sure. Taysom Hill leads the team in rushing this week. Taysom Hill in the year 2025. Enough already. Come on.
Absolutely
Enough already with like I've been generally like open to the Taysom Hill experience during his time with the New Orleans Saints, but I mean it must be like an owner or GM level edict that the guy is involved in the offense heavily. He's not like, this is a new coaching staff. Kellen Moore doesn't even know who Taysom Hill is until he arrives in the building, and yet he's still getting real deal. Like they're pulling Tyler Shuck, this rookie quarterback they're trying to evaluate for Taysom Hill on key fourth downs. It's
Are you like
crazy.
Suggesting that like Taysom Hill has compromising photos of someone high up in that organization or something? Like what level are we taking this to?
I'm not suggesting it. I'm not suggesting it. That's all I'll say on the matter. So I don't know about you. I don't have any regrets on any of these players being in the coping corner. Travion Henderson, obviously the situation has changed, but did you see enough in this past week's game to say he's no longer a coping corner candidate?
No, I think I want to leave him in there at least for one more week here. And the value for him is just going to be totally dependent on Ramondre Stevenson's injury and whether he's going to be out for an extended period, whether he's going to be back this week. Because if Stevenson comes back, Henderson just returns to being like that change of pace guy, right? And we'll also see, and I think the team is going to tell us in the next 24, 48 hours here before the NFL trade deadline how badly hurt Stevenson is. Because if they go out and make a move for a veteran back, that's going to indicate that Stevenson potentially could be out for a little while here. So either way, I think there's going to be somebody else in that backfield with Henderson. Hopefully it's Stevenson and he's healthy and he can get back out there and producing like he was earlier in the season. But yeah, I mean, it's 2 games that are decent here from him. 87 scrimmage yards on 19 touches this week. 75 yards in week 8. So these are good signs. You want him to be moving in that direction, and yet we know it's really just because of the injury to Stevenson.
And even still, he lost goal line work to Terrell Jennings, who apparently is a childhood friend of Pop Douglas. So there's a lot of connective tissue, I guess, here on this Patriots team. So, I mean, I don't know. We'll see what happens with Traven Henderson, but he's at least a guy you can start in your flex spot right now, but is somebody that we don't want you panicking on because of how bad the season was to start this year. So with that, let's get into our first segment here for the People's Panic Meter. This is on pass catchers here to start. Let's get into the first one, which is from James Z, who sends this in on Rome Odunze. Is it time to panic about Odunze? I know you're an Odunze bro. I am too. But 3 of the 4 previous weeks have been disappointing, including this goose egg against the Bengals. It seems like he has a drop issue and isn't really being used as the alpha wide receiver 1 like in the first 4 weeks. Also, not to mention that his heel has been bothering for him a bit. Panic? Love the show. All right, Boone. What's the panic level on Rome Odunze? You know I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I want to hear what you think first.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what your take is. For me, it's still just some panic. And I know I said I was spicy off the top, but this one I'm not overreacting on yet. And I wonder what you've uncovered in all your research. But I agree. I get the frustration that 3 of the last 4 weeks since the bye have been essentially he's just been dragging your fantasy team down. Yes, so that is unfortunate. And this matchup on paper with the Bengals, you thought it was a good one, but their corner, DJ Turner, he's been playing really, really well this year. I probably didn't factor that in enough, to be honest, in terms of where I had him ranked. I really didn't necessarily think that he was going to spend a ton of time with Odunze and factor in that much, but they're able to take on number 1 receivers and really slow them down. We saw that here. So you end up with Odunze's worst outing of the season, and yet he's still just 1 week removed from a 100-yard game. Like, how much can we panic here when we saw 2 weeks ago this guy go out and put up over 100 yards? So some panic for the fact that he's shown now that he can be erased, that he can have these down weeks more often than not. And yet, I mean, the Giants and the Steelers are 2 of his next 3 here, Harmon. So I think he's going to get going again. I only have it at some panic. Where do you stand on him?
I think that is the correct answer, is some panic. Because, look, obviously, I want to say this off the top. I understand. I can sit here and talk about wide receiver volatility till the cows come home, and I will, and how you do just kind of have to ride the wave at this position, and you just got to deal with slow stretches, bad games, and yet it is extra difficult to look at the damn 0 in your fantasy lineup. Okay, I've got Rome Odunze teams. Some of them I'm going to survive the 0. Some of them I might be counting on some players on Monday Night Football, and I will not pull a Boone here and curse any of those players. They shall remain nameless. Gonna leave it at that. But so I understand. It's just tough to look at that 0. It's frustrating to look at that 0, especially because, like, this post that we're showing here from our fantasy handle, like, did Rome Odunze drop this potential touchdown pass? Well, it got tipped, and then it's not where he expects it to be. So it hits his hands. Like, he should catch it. And I like the drop issue thing. I wouldn't say he's had drop issues, but he has not brought in difficult but catchable targets this year. Like, he's had some mistakes in contested catch situations. He has had some drops. Like, and I've said that throughout the course of the year. If we're calling balls and strikes here, that's been a problem for him. I don't think it will be a long-term problem. I think it can get corrected. This is a guy who had great hands in his rookie year. It's a guy who had great hands in his collegiate charting profile. Like, this is not something I think is going to be a long-term stressor for him. So, and I also want to remind people too, think back to week 6, what we said when he had kind of a down game, 2 catches for 32 yards. He had a touchdown in that game that got wiped off the board due to an illegal shift penalty. So some of the results in that game are even a little bit misleading. The Saints game, they just established the run. And then week 8, he has 100 yards, to your point. He was top 15 among all pass catchers in yards per game if you remove this goose egg game, which I realize is the game that we're focusing on here. So I just want to, again, remind people that, yes, it's been a little bit up and down here. I don't think Rome Odunze is a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. I don't think he's yet proven to be an elite number 1 receiver. He's a second-year player. So I'm not totally kind of just saying, yes, he's like a Drake London type. Drake London's in his 4th year. You suffer through that kind of down couple stretches from him, but now he's back to producing a freak show because he's in the prime of his career. Rome Odunze is not quite there yet. He's not quite in that stratosphere. However, I do want to talk about this Week 9 matchup, and you mentioned DJ Turner, and I agree with you that I also did not put enough emphasis on that when talking about Rome. Although I don't even think we talked about Rome Odunze because he's a guy that you just view as a set and forget type player. So kind of follow me down this little rabbit hole here in terms of the DJ Turner thing. If you look at the players that have actually thumped this Bengals defense from like a pass, like a receiving perspective, it's not been a lot of number one wide receivers. It's been tight ends. It's been like Colson Loveland, number one in terms of most receiving yards put up against the Bengals. Number 2 is Pat Freiermuth. Number 3 is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Number 4 is Sam Laporta. Number 5 is Matthew Golden. Like these are all guys, slot receivers, tight ends. You just look at top 16 in terms of most yards put up against the Bengals this year. It's Josh Jacobs, Olamide Zaccheaus, Harold Fannin, Dylan Sampson, Tyler Johnson, Jerry Jeudy, Marvin Mims, DJ Moore, Justin Jefferson, Parker Washington, Cortland Sutton, and then those 5 that I mentioned at the top. It's a lot of running backs, tight ends. It's not big games like Cortland Sutton, even 81 yards against the Bengals. Justin Jefferson, 75 yards against the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's these number one receivers because DJ Turner is so good, and he did track Rome Odunze around the field for most of last week's game. I think the Bears knew that going into it, and we're saying, hey, let's build the game plan around Colson Loveland, around the slot receiver, around DJ Moore as kind of this gadget guy, around our trick plays, which we saw, and of course, Kyle Monungai in the ground game. And the last point of this, and this is the only reason I'm a little concerned going forward, is this heel injury for Rome Odunze. He mentioned that it popped up and kind of got exaggerated, aggravated during the Ravens game. I do wonder if, again, that's another reason why he was just kind of removed from the game plan with only 3 targets in this one, because that is an extreme outlier in terms of his targets per route run. Because otherwise, like, yeah, last week against the Ravens, 29%, 24% the week before. That's been clearly the outlier in terms of his target level. So those are kind of my theories on what happened in this past week's game.
Well, I will say, to put a bow on the whole thing, the fact that they did still have success as an offense, I think is a bit of the positive here, right? Like if they went out and struggled and Caleb looked terrible and all those things that have happened in previous weeks, if that occurred again here in overall what was a great matchup, then I would be more concerned about Odunze because I'd just be concerned about the entire environment there in Chicago and that offense. And yet, because they were able to still move the ball, they were able to score. I think that's going to be the positive to take away, and that it will still be Odunze's week some weeks moving forward, including, I think, some of the easier matchups coming up. But we're going to have to pay attention to that heel injury because, yeah, I think there's a few guys out there that are kind of playing through things at this point, and you just assume that if they're active on Sunday, they're okay and they're good to go. But yeah, some of these guys might be playing at 70, 80%, right? And if they're not 100% and they're going against a quality player on the opposite side of the ball, you might not see the same kind of results. So we'll keep an eye on that this week. We'll see what his practice participation is like. But yeah, I'm not freaking out about Odunze. I still think he's a good talent. I still going to rank him as, a high-end wide receiver too, who still has that wide receiver 1 upside some weeks. And let's hope more weeks than not the rest of the way, even though it's a mix of good matchups and bad matchups. It's not like he's got a cupcake schedule for the rest of the season.
Yeah, just to put the final point in the DJ Turner part of all of this, Pro Football Focus grades, people have their feelings on it. I'm just saying, like, let's get into the ballpark of what these players are. The Bengals defense, the grades from PFF are obviously all terrible, except for 2 players, Trey Hendrickson and DJ Turner, the only guys that are above 65 in their grades. Trey Hendrickson, 82.9, DJ Turner, 73 overall. And from a coverage perspective, DJ Turner is actually the 4th highest graded cornerback, according to Pro Football Focus. He's only allowed 47 targets against him to be 47% of the targets against him to be completed. So that is definitely something that I think Ben Johnson noticed and said, hey, my number 1 wide receiver, who is already starting to draw like extra defensive attention against the Ravens. They were assigning him some double team stuff like that. Let's just I hate to say it, let's just sacrifice him in this game and we'll get it done in other ways, which to your point was something that this offense needed to prove, right? They needed to get some of these other threats going. Everybody knows that. We know that. So we'll move forward with and accept some of the volatility with the Odunze, but I do think he's someone that you were still starting every single week. If he goes out and thumps the Giants next week, you would be 0% surprised by that as long as he is healthy. Let's stick in wide receiver volatility zone here and get to Zach S. on DK Metcalf, who titled it DK Metcalf ghosting like it's still Halloween. Big fan of the show. My panic for this week is the DK Metcalf situation. He nearly put up a goose egg this week, but has been volatile throughout the season. DK standing for don't know where the rest of expected fantasy points has went. He only surpassed 60 receiving yards in 3 games this season, and his 5 receiving touchdowns this year have been helped bail him out from some of his performances. Should DK Metcalf be viewed as a boom bust flex wide receiver going forward based on the Steelers' script? What do we think about DK Metcalf going forward, Justin Boone?
It's only some panic for me here. And part of it is, what was the expectation for DK Metcalf this season? Like, is he not coming through exactly how you would have expected? Like, this isn't a ceiling outcome. He's not marrying the volume and the big plays and the touchdowns and having like an absolutely massive season, but he's producing like a top 20 receiver. That's what he is in fantasy points per game right now. As Zach here wrote in, you know, he's got 5 touchdowns in 8 games. He's gone over 80 yards in 3 games. Like, this is what we expected. This is a good season from DK Metcalf. It's not a league winning season, but to talk about him as like a flex play, I think that's way, way too far down. He's been much more consistent than that with the touchdowns, with the yardage. So he's going to pay off. It might take, you know, a trip to the end zone, or it might take some big plays, but that's the kind of receiver he is. And he's a pretty solid wide receiver too, in my mind, for fantasy the rest of the season. So I'm not really sure, like, he's got a bit of a name, but could you really trade him for that much? Are you really improving your roster somewhere else? Like, if you have a surplus at receiver, sure, then maybe you can move him for a running back or something like that. But overall, I don't know that you're going to get like great value for somebody like DK Metcalf, but I do think he is a solid wide receiver too in your lineup. So just some panic for me. You know, he's not hitting the ceiling outcome, like I said, but I don't really know what this person was expecting from DK that they would be panicking this much based on what he's done so far.
Yeah, I think he is a boom bust flex wide receiver, in my opinion. I mean, I think he's more of like a high end 3 than maybe a low end 2, high end 3. He's somewhere in that borderline because he's 32nd in team target share and he's 18th in team air yard share. So I think somewhere in the middle there, if we're talking about his share of like the overall opportunity in his offense, because to me, if he was going to be a consistent player every single week, he was going to have to be something closer to like a 28% target share player, because we know that's going to be very run heavy. It's going to be a slow paced offense. And that just hasn't really been the case. So I do think there's, you know, I think some panic is probably the right answer if we're putting it on the scale here, because I think it's about the expectations. And to me, I think, yeah, he's going to be a guy who is volatile. He's going to be boom bust. And the boom weeks might be a little bit more like, not, you know, 150 yards and 2 touchdowns or something like that. It looks a little bit more like what we saw against the Minnesota Vikings, which I think has got to probably be his biggest game so far this season.
The other thing that I suppose we should mention, and it's kind of weird timing with us recording this on Monday before the Monday Nighter with the trade deadline on Tuesday, is the Steelers have been rumored for a while now to be in the market for a second receiver. So if they did go out and get a Jacoby Myers or someone like that, that could definitely change the equation here for DK Metcalf, and we'd have to reassess at that point. But to me right now, yeah, I think low-end wide receiver too, who's, yeah, a bit of a boomer bust play, but a guy who's shown so far that he's getting it done. Aaron Rodgers is looking for him in the end zone. They're coming through with that. Yes, touchdowns can be volatile, but the fact that he's produced the way he has so far this year, even though he has relied on the touchdowns, I think we should be happy with that. And I think if you have him as a wide receiver too in your lineup, you're doing well. I don't think that he's somebody that you really need to panic about that much.
I would totally hate it if the next time he does turn in one of those 100-yard games and a touchdown, if you maybe tried to trade him for somebody that's a little bit more reliable, or if you need help at a different position. They do have Marquez Valdes-Scantling in Pittsburgh right now. That probably doesn't really move the needle very much. It'll just be in their rotation cast of wide receiver 2s, unless they trade for someone at the deadline. Like, I do think if they get a Jacoby Myers type player in here, that complicates the picture a little bit, because again, he's only exceeded 7 targets once this year, and he's been kind of in that 6 to 4 to 5 range in a good bit of games here. So I wouldn't mind it if you shipped off Metcalf at some point, but yeah, it's just all about the expectations here. Next one comes in from Anthony on Justin Jefferson. Really appreciate and enjoy the show. How do we feel about Jefferson with how low the passing volume is from JJ McCarthy? I will not share with the people here, Boone, what you texted me in the middle of JJ McCarthy's hot start to this game. But
That is
Any
one of those
panic
ones
on-
when as soon as I hit send, I was like, oh man, he's definitely going to screen grab that and put it on the show. There's no doubt.
No.
I will
would
share it.
never
We can
do.
tell everyone. I made the joke going back to my bold prediction before the season when I didn't say that he was going to be the next Patrick Mahomes, but I just brought up Patrick Mahomes' second year, his first
Just
year as a
implied it.
starter. And I just said that we've seen other quarterbacks who didn't do much the rookie season, who are in a good environment, come through and post a very strong second season in their first season as a starter. And I definitely at the time said he's not going to throw for 5,000 yards. He's not going to throw for 50 touchdowns. He's not going to put up those kind of numbers, but that he could have a good year. And yet, obviously, things went very south very quickly early in the season. Then he gets hurt, comes out here. And in the first half of the game, he looked pretty good in the first half of the game, I thought. And maybe that's, he felt comfortable with the scripted plays that they have, that sort of thing. But he definitely looked good in the first half. And I texted you, I believe something along the lines of JJ McCarthy, the next Patrick Mahomes, ha ha ha. And what was your response? Something along the lines of like, it's back in play.
It's back on the
something
table.
like
It's
that.
back in.
There
Yeah,
you
it's
go.
back on the table.
And yet in the second half, not quite as good, right? We saw a little more of the JJ McCarthy that we saw for the better part of week 1 and for pretty much all of week 2, where it was a bit more of a struggle, but at least he comes out with a pretty solid game here fantasy wise. At least he was able to help the team get the win. Like, this is what we need. We need small steps. He's not going to be a superstar right out of the gate. We need signs of life. We need them to be doing some positive things. And we saw some positive things in this game. I think Jefferson's a tough one because people aren't getting like the week winning performances. And while we talked about a guy like DK Metcalf, when it was like, well, you don't really expect DK Metcalf to do that every single week or that often. He's just going to have a few every year. Jefferson, you absolutely expect this to happen more often than not, right? You think that he's going to be able to go out and have 20, maybe 30-point games and lead you to victories by himself. That's why you drafted him where you drafted him. So this is kind of tough. He's still giving you double-digit fantasy points most weeks. So that's been pretty good, right? Almost every single week giving you 10-plus fantasy points. But because of where you drafted him, that's where you have to assess the panic here. And I wonder if he's a guy who you could potentially cash in on his name. Maybe somebody out there is excited about potentially getting him down the stretch. And you could try to get him off your roster and get somebody back that you feel more confident in. But I have a hard time getting away from JJ when, he's remained fairly productive this year, even though he hasn't had the monster games. And even in the 3 games with McCarthy, like I'm looking at it right here, like he's found the end zone twice. He had 81 yards in the other game. So it's not like he's been bad in those games overall from a production standpoint. He's still top 5 in receiving yards. We still got the Monday Nighter to go tonight, but top 5 heading into the Monday Nighter here in receiving yards on the season. And if you look at the schedule is pretty good. He only plays one team that isn't a plus matchup the rest of the way for fantasy receivers. And then in the fantasy playoffs, the Cowboys, the Giants, and the Lions, they're all top 10 in fantasy points allowed to wideouts. So I kind of think trading Jefferson would be a mistake. I get it if you're frustrated. I get it because, like I said, he is kind of a name that I think you could get something decent back for. And yet I would be holding on to him. I would see where this offense can go because, I just look at that schedule and I think about the fantasy playoffs, and I would feel like a fool if I traded away a guy like Justin Jefferson, knowing he has that schedule in the fantasy playoffs and then watching him go off for another team.
I think that's fair. I think some panic is probably warranted just because they have really ripped the volume out of this offense when JJ McCarthy's been under center, and it's been much more drop back friendly with Carson Wentz, who's a veteran. That's not that surprising. So I want to advise some patience here on just labeling McCarthy. He is this or he is that. I think he had some good moments last week. I also think he had some really bad moments last week. And just the fact that he did have some tangible good moments was a sign of progress because we didn't really see much of that in his first 2 starts outside of kind of the comeback mode against the Chicago Bears in week 1. So I think it is going to be a bit of a moving target for McCarthy and obviously Justin Jefferson and how he can go along with him. So some panic here, but I really like your point about the schedule and how that can hopefully when McCarthy is getting ramped up, it aligns with that schedule and Jefferson finishes really strong. He's somebody I'd probably want to try to hang on to throughout the rest of the season. He's still wide receiver 12 in points per game right now, which I realize that's not what you drafted him for, but it's not as if it's been a complete stone cold disaster for him.
Yeah.
Next one here, Travis sends us in on 2 underperforming wide receivers. I'd like to pick Harmon's reception perception brain on 2 depth wideouts who are massively underperforming, Keon, Coleman, and Darnell Mooney. I know these guys didn't have massive expectations this season, but they're still a big letdown. Is Mooney still hurt? He had some big games last year in terms of production, but this year had several one-catch games. As for Coleman, we've been waiting for someone on the Bills to emerge, and we thought it would be him after a big week 1, but that was a fluke, it seems. Kincaid seems to be the guy that has emerged there. What are your thoughts on these two? Let's start with Keon Coleman on your Bills first. I think I said to you at one point in the offseason, Boone, that it kind of feels like either one of Dalton Kincaid or Keon Coleman needs to step forward for this offense. I think we know which one of them has done that so far.
Yeah, and you mentioned at the top of the show that we could probably sit down one week and go over all the players that we'd be willing to put in Coping Corner that we just haven't gotten questions on. I feel like I would have put Coleman in Coping Corner a month ago, a few weeks ago. This is a long time coming for him. It hasn't happened, right? He hasn't topped 45 receiving yards since week 1, like the person mentioned there. Only scored 2 touchdowns on the year, so you would have hoped like maybe he could be a double-digit touchdown scorer. That could get him home for fantasy. That's not happening. He's just not making an impact. And I always bring up, when we do the waiver wire section every week, I bring up that on the waiver wire, when you're looking at receivers, there are a lot of guys that are in like that wide receiver 4 flex range, guys that you could go pick up any given week pretty much and slot into your lineup if you need that sort of desperation play, if you had injuries or bye weeks or all that sort of stuff that you're dealing with. That's all Coleman is right now. Like, he's a touchdown or bust version of that. So I don't really know why you need to hold him on your roster even, right? Why are you carrying him if you could just go to the waiver wire and get that at a moment's notice when you need it? I would much rather pick someone up that has more upside, a guy that could potentially turn into a difference maker for your team. Because I think at this point, we just know that Coleman's not going to do it. I don't know if you want to comment on that before we get to the Mooney part of it all, but yeah, for me, Coleman he's dead in the water for fantasy this season. We might see the odd game where he finds the end zone or has a big play, but overall, get him away from your lineups and get him away from your rosters.
It was the week 5 game that he was benched in the first quarter because of like disciplinary issues, right? The Patriots game. Yeah. Okay, so then ever since then, Keon Coleman's route participation has gone 83%, 76% to 73%. He's dipped in terms of playing time on a weekly basis ever since then. He just saw 2 targets in this past week's game. The Bills are trying to find other answers because I think they know what Keon Coleman is. And I don't even want to talk about my big slot theory about him anymore because the team has never shown any desire to use him that way. And Khalil Shakir is their best receiver and he plays in the slot. So it's not happening for Keon Coleman. I agree with you. I would have been comfortable. I mean, I've never been in on Coleman as a perimeter X receiver, and I definitely, outside of the fourth quarter in week 1, I could have put him in the Coping Corner at any time. So yeah, go ahead. We could throw him in the Coping Corner. That is what it is. We'll see if anything changes for him. The rest of his career is more what I'm interested in. This season, it is what it is in terms of Keon Coleman there. Should we move to Mooney here? I think I don't want to bury Keon anymore.
To Mooney. I don't know if you have thoughts you want to give off the top here. For me, it's total panic, but I would be willing, if you want to make a case for Coping Corner, I would be willing to listen to it on this one because, I mean, it's total panic. You want to say that it's just been an injury plague season and that the further removed from the injury he gets, that we'll start to at least see some version of the player that we've seen in the past who's been more productive in previous years. But at the moment, I think and a large part of it is because of the injuries. It just seems like a lost season, right? Like only 1 game over 45 yards. He's been held to 1 catch in each of the last 2 outings here. It's not happening for him either. And you can wait around. You can hope that it happens. But what's the ceiling for him? How much better could he be than one of those wide receiver 4 flexes who are always available on the waiver wire? I don't know that it's that great based on, a healthy Drake London being there, getting the kind of volume that he can draw. It would take a London injury. And even when that happened a couple weeks ago, we didn't see Mooney come through in that spot. So yeah, I'd be willing. Do you want to make a case for Coping Corner on him? Cause I'm teetering total panic Coping Corner kind of.
Yeah, I just think he's a Coping Corner guy because what are you really going to get from Darnell Mooney at this point? It has been a super strange season for Mooney. The injuries, the coaching staff also kind of called him out at one point. I think it was after the Panthers game mentioned that, but he just hasn't really been all that involved. And let's also be real about who Darnell Mooney is. He's a guy who's had kind of up years and down years throughout his career. He's not just been a metronome type player in terms of consistency on a year-to-year basis. So this could just be one of those years where it was great last year. It's down this year. And quite frankly, I don't think the Falcons should be trying to get him involved because, as I've consistently brought up on the show, the offense is only good. Michael Penix is only good when he's hyper-targeting Drake London. I sometimes think with young quarterbacks, the less you can put on their plate, the better. And Penix seems to be one of those guys in terms of, hey, this is your number one read. Go to him over and over and over again. That might not lead to a winning formula, but the Falcons aren't going anywhere this year anyways. So, and they're going to give a top 15 draft pick to the damn Rams.
And I'm down for the coping corner thing. I will say, though, the one element that just kept me on the verge and kept me at the high end of total panic is the matchup this week. They're going against the Colts. They give up the fourth most fantasy points to wide receivers. Yeah. This is the best matchup that the Falcons have actually had this season. Like, it's not like their schedule has been absolutely brutal, but on paper, this is the best matchup. So if there was ever a time for Mooney to do something, but I don't even think he's a player that if he goes out and has a huge game that you could then turn around and trade him for anything, right? So I don't think there's any reason to necessarily hold on to him or to keep him out of the coping corner here. So let's do it.
Yeah, maybe you want to bet on his like over under receiving prop. That maybe that's the way to do it because not only has the Colts secondary been beatable, but they have been kind of specifically beatable by these smaller, speedier type receivers. I think about Troy Franklin earlier in the season. Even Calvin Austin led the Steelers in receiving yards last week, and he is kind of that smaller, speedier guy. So, but even then, you're not going to trust him in the next week if he goes out there. So, what's really the point? I think he's a coping corner type of player here. Last one to get to in this segment here. We're going to move away from a pass catcher on the second one. We've got two players here from Kyle W. Appreciate the show. Listen every week. Harmon, the pen meter looks safe, and I am rooting for Lad. I am also rooting for Lad. Kyle, appreciate you, buddy. Want to have a convo about George Kittle. He has been average as a tight end. Writing this before MNF. Hopefully no Boone MNF flukes, but as a guy that was drafted in the area of McBride and Bowers, seems like Kittle has the ceiling of crawl space and has the floor of a basement. Second submission is Jordan Mason, and I think he belongs in the coping corner. Thanks, gents. Let's actually hit Jordan Mason first before George Kittle, because I think the Kittle one's a little bit more tough. Where are you at with Jordan Mason in terms of the panic meter on him?
I don't think I'm willing to go coping corner, but I get why someone would want to consider it. For me, it's total panic. Before Aaron Jones got hurt even, it seemed like Mason was taking over that backfield. There was a lot of positive reports from the beat writers. Then Aaron Jones gets hurt and you go, okay, this guy's going to run away with the job. Didn't exactly do that. Had a couple good games, found the end zone, but nothing massive. And then Aaron Jones comes back and just immediately steps back into a lead role there, gets more work this week, looks fresh, looks more explosive, gets hurt again. And we'll see what that injury ends up being. I believe it's an AC joint sprain. We'll see if that costs him any time. That would potentially put Jordan Mason back in that lead back role and give him a chance here. But I don't know. For me, Harmon, I don't know that I can listen to the caller here and put him in the coping corner, because I feel like there's still a chance that Aaron Jones, with his extensive injury history, that he could miss time with this one. And if that happens and we're back to Jordan Mason being that lead back, then he's a worthy fantasy play in good matchups. And they do have some good matchups coming up.
Yeah, that's the thing with me, is just if Jones misses more time, because as long as Jones is healthy, I do think it's tough for Mason, and he would be a total panic player for me. And I have him on some spots, and I started him this week, and I think I'm going to be okay on some of those lineups, but it's just like, God, I really don't want to have to, but I just don't have a better option. So we got to play him. And that's kind of where he is right now. The reality is, when I liked Mason in the offseason, I just thought this offense would be a lot better than it is. Yeah. And it's just not. So that's why he's a total panic player for me. On the George Kittle thing, I don't really know where to put this, because I understand where Kyle is coming from. This should be the time when George Kittle is going absolutely berserk. No Brandon Ayuk, no Ricky Pearsall, and yet it's been fine. It's not the worst. That he obviously had the one goose egg, but other than that, it's been fine. But I think the expectations were a lot higher than that.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been a little boomer bust at tight end, and his ceiling, his booms are like week winning booms, and there's not a lot of tight ends that can offer that. but he does have down weeks. And I mean, in the last couple of games here, like he found the end zone a couple weeks ago. Like it's not like he's giving you nothing. I wonder if this is more based on like expectations that people held him on their roster while he was on IR, waiting for him to come back and building him into this player that he just isn't necessarily, a ton of weeks. Like there's going to be average weeks for him. He's not going to go out and put up these massive totals week in and week out, but he has that ceiling, and you hold him because he can give you that kind of point total from a position where you just don't get it very often. And it's not like you can go to the waiver wire and find somebody who can just step into your lineup and can give you the kind of production that Kittle will at times. So to me, like he's not Christian McCaffrey, but he's still a good player and a guy that I'm not really panicking on here. Like I only have some panic about George Kittle, because I almost feel like it's guaranteed that he is going to come through and have a few of these monster efforts, and they are going to win people some weeks, and they are probably going to help people win, playoff games and fantasy championships. And what are you getting rid of him for? And who else do you have on your roster? If you got lucky and you got Odunze Gadsden or someone like that, then you can think about it. But if you're thinking about moving Kittle and just starting to play the waiver wire game at tight end, that's a very, very risky thing to do.
Yeah.
I'll say this.
I do think there's
some better matchups on the way, right? He gets the Cardinals in week 11, the Panthers in week 12, the Colts in week 16, the Bears in week 17. Those are all going to be some better matchups for him as well. So I think there's going to be some more obvious spots where he can come through, but he's George Kittle. We're not giving up on George Kittle here, are we?
No, we're not giving up, but I do think we got to reset the expectations here, because I think people forget sometimes that like Kittle's role doesn't change just because the wide receivers are out. Like he's sitting on 16% targets per route run this year, 15.2 in week 8, 18.2 in week 9. And I think people went a little crazy with the target expectations with these guys out. I think they expected him to be like a 10 target per game guy. He's just never been that. And I don't think that says anything about Kittle. It just is the way the offense is. So I think he's still a tight end 1. He just hasn't given you big weeks yet. But you're right. Those big weeks are probably coming. I might be a little bit closer to total panic just because of the expectations, but it's not like, what are you going to do about it type thing. If you stumbled on Odunze Gadsden, something like that, then sure, you can try to trade George Kittle off name value when he has a big name. But I also think, Boone, there's a chance Ricky Pearsall and these guys get back. Brock Purdy, I mean, dude, I don't even know when Brock Purdy's coming back. It sounds like the 49ers don't know either, so that might just be something we're saying until week 18. I don't know. But getting all those guys back actually could make the offense better, just increase like the buoyancy of it. They're passing the ball more. There's a chance that actually improves things for Kittle, who mostly has those big weeks because he scores touchdowns.
Yeah, and you brought up the Purdy aspect. I do think that is a pretty big variable here, that if we do get Purdy back down the stretch and with all these other guys back, this could go back to being one of the best offenses in the league, right? And I'm hopeful that Purdy returns at some point, but I agree that we haven't gotten anything concrete about when he is going to be back. And it's been so weird that he's been practicing in a limited fashion, and yet they're just not putting him out there, so they don't feel confident in that toe right now. I'm worried about his outlook the rest of the season, but if he gets back out there, if he's healthy enough, that would only give this offense another boost, and it would only give Kittle another boost.
All right, we're going to take our first quick break. When we come back, we'll run through more of your submissions to the People's Panic Meter right after this. All right, we're back. We're continuing to roll through your submissions to the People's Panic Meter. Coming out of week 9, let's get into some Sunday night football fallout here for our next 2 submissions, starting with David G on Kenneth Walker. Hey, guys, first off, love the show. Followed Boone here. A member of the Boone Brigade, as I always say, but really enjoy the back and forth between you two. Makes my morning commute tolerable. Yeah, I appreciate you, buddy, bringing them in here. Anyways, I'd like to preface this with I wish Kenneth Walker a long and prosperous NFL career, free of injuries. I get from a real-life football perspective why it's beneficial to have him and Charbonnet splitting the work. However, this is fantasy, not reality, and no one drafted this guy expecting a touchdown-dependent running back 3 that does not get a carry inside of the 30. He's simply not startable, full stop. Again, great that he's healthy, but I didn't spend a 4th-round pick on a bye week fill-in who just seeded a goal line touchdown to the blocking tight end. When are we going to stuff this guy in the coping corner and be done with it? Sincerely hope I'm painting the clown makeup on later in the season for this take. First of all, let me just say, AJ Barner is not just a blocking tight end, okay? Don't disrespect the great AJ Barner just because you're mad at Kenneth Walker. But David, we appreciate the hell out of you, buddy. Thank you for sending this one in. But let's just be respectful to the great AJ Barner. All right, Boone. Kenneth Walker, state of the state. Go.
We're doing it. We're putting him in the coping corner, and this is one of my biggest L's of the season. I mean, he has the talent. We know he has the talent. This run game has not been as successful as we thought it was going to be overall, so that's part of this. But and I know you brought up this point last week, the idea that maybe one of the reasons that they've been using Charbonnet so much is because they're trying to keep Kenneth Walker healthy, a guy that's had injuries throughout his career. Try to keep him healthy for the stretch run, for the real life playoffs, which this team looks like a true contender. So they're going to want that back available, that guy that can, hit the home run from anywhere on the field. All of that stuff is true. And yet right now, I'm looking at a guy that hasn't reached double-digit fantasy points since week 4, hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3, hasn't been particularly effective in a month or so. And I hate, yards per carry, but averaging under 4 yards per carry for this guy is a travesty. That is brutal. He needs these big plays to elevate that. It's not happening. The run game is having some struggles, which is so weird because the passing attack has been pretty solid. And, this offense as a whole has been scoring points. This team's been winning. How they haven't been able to get this rushing attack going has been very, very strange. But I'm also frustrated by this backfield. And I know David said there, you can't start this guy. Well, I beg to differ. I have a team that's going to win my matchup by about 30 points this week. And I had Kenneth Walker in my starting lineup.
Humble brag.
Not doing that much. Imagine if I had a legit running back there, how much I would have won by in that league. But right now, Charbonnet is the only one that's coming through in this backfield, and it's because he's the one that gets the touchdowns from time to time. So, yeah, I think Kenneth Walker has to go to the coping corner. I don't think we need to talk about him much anymore. He's more down in that RB3 range for fantasy, and it is such a shame because I think in the right environment, if they were getting all the volume in their backfield, either of these backs could be a top 12 fantasy back. And yet right now we're looking at both of them in Walker and Charbonnet as maybe top 30 guys, but more in that RB3 flex range.
All right. Look out, Boone. I'm going to throw you under the bus here because I'm going to agree with you and say we're putting him in the coping corner, but I'm worried that we're doing it at the exact wrong time. Cause I kind of feel what I'm saying here is that if this blows up in our faces, I'm 100% blaming you for it, and I'm going to take no personal accountability. That's what I mean when I say I'm throwing you under the bus. But my thing is, I think Kenneth Walker should have been in the coping corner 4 weeks ago because it feels like we've been having this circular conversation, and I do stand by what I said, whether it was on this show. I know I said it on FFL, and I definitely said it on Football 301 this past week, that I do kind of think that that the Seahawks might be setting up it's for a December to remember for Kenneth Walker. I just, for some reason, feel that in my bones. And it's not because I'm a Kenneth Walker
doing
bull.
That, would it be December to remember, or would it be January that they would hold him for? Why unleash him in December? But do they need to? Right now they have a winning record. I don't know that they need to risk it in December. Regardless, I get your point.
They might. They might need to beat either the Rams or the Niners to win the division. That's a competitive division. So those December games are going to matter for this team. And I think the biggest problem for Walker, as you mentioned, is the overall rushing ecosystem is disappointing, and it's for both of these backs. They have issues at right guard. Anthony Bradford. Oh my God. It's just that there are issues with this run game overall. But that is something that could get corrected over the course of the year. So there is a part of me that worries we're putting Kenneth Walker in the coping corner at the exact wrong time, especially because, as we showed earlier, he actually did get the snaps inside the 10-yard line. He did lose the goal line carry to AJ Barner, which that's just hilarious. I don't know what to say about that. That is just outrageous. But it is what it is. Kenneth Walker is made for the coping corner because it's the same situation on a weekly basis, and people just keep complaining about it, even though nothing is changing and nothing will change.
Well, and he's the kind of guy, there's a ton of players we put in the coping corner where, I don't think they're going to have to come back out. And if they came back out, I would feel like I had egg all over my face. he's one that if we put him in here and he comes back out, I will be the happiest person in the world
Yes.
if Kenneth Walker gets to come out of the coping corner and I'm wrong about this take. But I just worry that the way that it's gone, we're going to continue to see Charbonnet involved. And I hope that this rushing attack gets going. I hope that some better matchups come up along the way where he can have those big, game-breaking plays, which we've known him to have in past seasons. But right now, from what I'm seeing, Harmon, I just have a hard time believing that that's going to change anytime soon. I don't see the variable that's going to switch in that all of a sudden, and he's going to start to produce like the player that I thought he could be before the year.
Yeah, if it changes, it would be an intangible thing like what I'm talking about, where there's no indicator that this is happening. It's just, hey, now it's time to unleash Kenneth Walker because he's our most explosive back, and I think they do know that. So, but that's not something we can forecast. Okay, week 13, that's when it's going to happen. So for now, he is a coping corner guy, and if something changes, just like it changed for Chase Brown, we can take him out. Like that's the deal with the coping corner.
Let's make sure that this clip gets out there on social media, that Kenneth Walker and everyone in the Seahawks organization sees this, and that it somehow motivates him to start producing and for them to get that rushing attack going. Fingers crossed.
Kenneth Walker, get Clint Kubiak a really good Christmas gift. Okay, get it to him early.
There you go.
Like, come on, get him a good Christmas gift early. You need
get
to
him a Thanksgiving gift. Get him anything. Yeah.
Get him a Halloween gift, little belated Halloween gift, Thanksgiving gift, whatever. Set yourself up for that December to remember. You need Kenneth Walker. Time to lock in on the holiday gift giving. Let's go, buddy. Otherwise, AJ Barner.
Maybe we should send it. We'll send it in his name from Kenneth. We'll send it though.
All right, that's a great idea. We're going to work on that behind the scenes. What is Kenneth? If you got good suggestions, let us know. What is the gift that we should give Clint Kubiak in Kenneth Walker's name? Tweet it at us. Leave it in the comments here on YouTube. Send it to the mailbag. Whatever. Let us know. We got to come together and fix this for the fantasy community. Let's stick on the Sunday Night Football game, as I mentioned here. Victor sent this in on JCM, Debo, the Commanders' offense. Entirely. What to do with Jacory /JCM /Bill, whatever you want to call him. I'm not going to say what you said because that's mean. He got a lot of offseason hype, dialed back to realistic expectation. I feel like he's not even exceeding realistic expectations with very little competition. With Jaden Daniels down as well, this offense is probably going to be worse and a huge dumpster fire. Is he just not good? Or could he turn it around late in the season? We got a lot of Commander submissions here, so I kind of think we just need to discuss this whole offense here, Boone. What's the state of the state on the Washington Commanders offense right now?
Take the whole group and put them all into the coping corner at this point, because this offense has not necessarily been good with Jaden Daniels out there. Now we're talking about Jaden Daniels being out for an extended period, maybe out for the rest of the season. And I mean, I'm going to talk about Marcus Mariota when we get to the waiver wire section. I'll spoil it right now. I'm going to talk about Marcus Mariota as somebody that you can play, especially in good matchups, a guy that can give you like 70-75% of what Jaden Daniels does, and could be potentially, a decent QB2 streamer, sometimes have QB1 weeks, but that's production. That's not overall what this offense is going to do week to week. And when you go through, like, Harmon, what am I missing here? Like, Terry McLaurin's hurt, and we haven't really seen much from him even when he has been out there this year. Deebo Samuel, 15 yards, 11 yards, 41 yards in his last 3 games. And now he doesn't have Daniels throwing to him, so that's a downgrade for him. Zach Ertz is a touchdown or bust guy, and he tends to score his touchdowns when Jaden Daniels is the one throwing to him. Now he's not going to have that either. I mean, Bill Krosky-Merritt, he hasn't scored more than 6 fantasy points in a game over a month. Like, I don't think the Lions this week are going to be the defense that he's going to do it against. Like, their run defense is very strong. Then they have a bye coming in week 12, so you factor that into, like, their fantasy outlook the rest of the way here. And yeah, there's going to be some games, right? Like, I'm looking at the schedule. The Dolphins in week 11, the Giants in week 15, the Cowboys in week 17. We'll give some consideration to playing some of these guys potentially in those games, but they're all going to be downgraded from where we had them previously this season. And I just don't think this offense is going anywhere without Jaden Daniels, because it wasn't really going anywhere with Jaden Daniels. So to me, it's take the whole group and let them join the coping corner, which is becoming a huge, huge group at this point.
100% co-sign everything you said there. The season's over. If Jaden Daniels is not coming back this year, and at this point, you're going to lose a few games here, he probably should not come back this year. The whole group goes in the Coping corner. This is one of those offenses that we can just start to cross off. You can't completely because, look, the player pool is the player pool. But, yeah, Deebo Samuel, who was kind of the best part of this passing game with Terry McLaurin in and out of the lineup, he started to slow down, which is kind of that's Deebo Samuel. Like he's a guy who once he starts picking up injuries, the play starts to decline because he plays so physical and plays that brand of football where he gets banged up. And that's a much more exciting role, him as that move around slot guy, when you have someone who could take the top off the defense and Terry McLaurin, and you have a great quarterback. You have neither right now. So, and Bill Krosky-Merritt, I mean, I feel like we've said it. He definitely is a guy that he's just a 2-down banger back on a bad team. That's not a great fantasy bet. It's just not. And I actually disagree that he's been bad. I think when you watch him play, like you could see he can play. I think the advanced metrics show that he can play. That being good and being good in fantasy are two different things, especially at the running back position. And he doesn't really have access to goal line carries because his team's not going to score a lot of points. And he doesn't get pass down work. So, like, period. End of story on that one.
And I will warn everyone now, don't overreact when Jacory Krosky-Merritt has 100 yards against the Dolphins in week 11, because he'll probably have a good game in that one. And if anything, that would be an opportunity to trade him if you can get anything of value for him in return, maybe package him with something else. But yeah, don't overreact to that. That will not be the reality. That will be the outlier the rest of the way.
Again, Coping Corner doesn't mean you're never starting this guy or we're done with them or anything like that. It's just the situation is what it is, and it's not changing. There's no more reason to panic about it. There's no more reason to panic about Bill Krosky-Merritt. We've seen what it is so far. I am concerned about this next one that we're going to get to here because of the way we talked about him last week. Eric B sends this on the number one waiver wire pickup last week. Hey, Matt and Boone, I need an urgent reading on my Tyrone Tracy panic meter. I spent the rest of my fab on him like a responsible, hopeful fantasy manager, and for one brief shining moment, I believe I'd locked in a safe running back too. Now, Devin Singletary is out here getting more touches, and my safe RB2 feels about as secure as a paper umbrella in a hurricane. Be honest. Am I screwed? Should I start hydrating in preparation for eating a pen out of sheer frustration, or is there still hope? Sincerely, Eric, the salty Tracy manager. Hey, no eating pens, all right? Don't be a dumbass and say that you are going to eat a pen. Never do that, okay? Only leave that kind of stupid stuff to me. Don't be putting yourself in that position, Eric. I do kind of think you need to totally panic about Tyrone Tracy, though. I did not see him getting out-snapped and outworked by Devin Singletary coming because it didn't happen last year.
I know. It's so shocking. It's really, really strange. And you need him. Like the idea of him taking over being an RB2 for fantasy really meant he was going to command a bigger share of this backfield, because Cam Scatterboot was 19 plus touches every week, right? So maybe it wouldn't be 19, but it'd be something close. Tracy with 8 this week. And yeah, there might be games where it's slightly higher than that, but yeah, I don't have a ton of confidence that he's going to be anywhere near that 19 number or well over 20 where Scatterboot was some weeks there. Now they get Chicago in week 10. So that's an easy matchup. But then after this, the Packers, the Lions, the Patriots, and then a bye. That is a nightmare. That is like a black hole for a fantasy running back. That month is going to be brutal in terms of his fantasy production. So you figured that Tracy would come out. He had 2 easy matchups on paper. Then we could reassess and figure out, do you want to trade him away before we get to the stretch run? Does he look like he's going to get the volume? And Jackson Dart, all this sort of stuff is going to allow him to keep producing. Now, yeah, I'm pretty worried about this one. I agree with you. It's total panic for me. He's, when I do the waiver wire column, people can go check out the column. I have in there like a recommended fab bid for guys. And when you have a player that I think is going to be like a season changer, a league winner type, it's max bid. I'm normally really aggressive on the waiver wire. I'll put 100% in there. But with a guy like this, I put 75% because there were some situations where maybe it doesn't totally work out. I had the same thing when Kamani Vidal got his role, where it just wasn't a guarantee, right? It wasn't a max bid kind of player, but it was a player that you're going to be aggressive because they have an opportunity. And sometimes that doesn't come through. And I worry that for Tracy, it's not going to happen here, that he's going to be more of that like RB3 flex kind of guy and not the RB2 that we thought he could be, because the volume just isn't necessarily going to be there for him.
Yeah, definitely total panic. Wouldn't say Coping Corner just yet because maybe the the Giants look at this and they say, hey, no, we got to get Tracy more work. That's totally possible. They lost this game last week. So I think that's on the table, but definitely total panic after adding him off of the waiver wire. All right, let's get a few social media submissions in, starting with this one from Kenny, which I maintain is an overdue addition to the Coping Corner. Brian Thomas Jr. might be ungood. What's the panic level on Brian Thomas Jr.? I don't. Again, I talked about wide receiver volatility off the top. Boone, I said this last week that 95% of the time it's just, hey, ride the wave, stuff, aka you know what happens at this position. Well, I mean, that's 95% of the time. I think Brian Thomas Jr.'s 2025, unfortunately, is part of that 5%. So to me, I want to see him recover for 2026 and beyond. Where are you at with Brian Thomas Jr.?
I'm finally willing to come to the Coping Corner with him. I think we got to put him there. And I could sit here and make like every argument, right? I could try to do the same thing and say, well, he only played 65% of the snaps and he had 55 yards and he got hurt in the game. And look, a few games prior, he was producing. Something's off. He's not happy. He's been injured this year. Something is off. The vibes are bad. I don't see it turning around. And if you look ahead, like he plays the Texans this week and the Chargers next week. So if he's out there for these games, they're bad matchups. And then the fantasy playoffs, Sauce Gardner in week 15, Pat Surtain in week 16, if those guys are healthy. So yeah, we're putting him in here. Coping Corner, solitary confinement, apparently in
this
the Coping
is too
Corner.
Harsh.
Just, yeah, one of the most disappointing, if not the most disappointing fantasy player this year.
Oh, I think he's like run away the most disappointing fantasy player this year. And unfortunately, like I said, he's made his own mistakes this year. There's obviously more to it. And I don't think it's over for him forever. I do think he's a guy that can bounce back next year, but he's going to be one of those guys that everybody's burnt off on him, and we'll just kind of have to see how this goes. So rest of the season, now he's banged up. Well, we'll see what happens here. All right. This one comes in on the Chargers skill position players. With the exception of Odunze Gadsden, it feels like too many mouths to feed situation on top of a depleted offensive line. Every week someone will get home, but are the wide receivers more so in the wide receiver 3 flex range, and is Vidal just a flex option now too? Brendan N. also sent in this email concerning for Amari and Hampton. Are we panicking about the if/when Amari and Hampton returns? It looks like he's still injured in a walking boot for something that seemed like a minor injury. I recently made a trade for him on a contending redraft team. As always, thank you and love the show. Yeah, let's talk Chargers skill position players here, especially because we got news today. Joe Alt is out for the rest of the season after having ankle surgery. That is a big, big problem for this Chargers skill position group. So where are we at with the Chargers skill position players, Boone? If you have any specific guys you want to hit on, if not, just give me kind of the update on this entire team.
I mean, for the whole team, there's some panic for sure. Like, this has been a very good offense. They've been producing more weeks than not. So I can't go much further than just some panic for the offense as a whole. There's some specific guys I think we could be a little more worried about. But also, Harmon, like, why is this franchise so cursed with injuries? Like, can anyone answer me that? Like, if you're working in, like, the HR department for the Chargers, do you, like, trip and fall, and instead of just getting up and dusting yourself off, you, like, break your leg and you have to, like, leave for months at a time? Like, what is happening with this organization? Seems like every time they're set up well, they end up with a ton of injuries. If you look at specific players, like, I think Keenan Allen is the one that we should have some total panic on at the moment. And it's just like lately he's been under 45 yards in 3 of his last 4 outings. But I think the more concerning thing is the playing time has shifted for him, right? 25% and 37% of the snaps the last 2 weeks. That coincides with Odunze Gadsden coming on and becoming a meaningful part of this offense. So I think total panic on Keenan, maybe even Coping Corner if you wanted to make a case for that. The rest of the guys, they are what they are, right? Like, Herbert is still a borderline elite quarterback 1. Like, he is putting up great numbers. I am a little bit concerned about the offensive line with him, but he's managed to overcome it normally. McConkey, a fantasy wide receiver 2. We might push him down a little bit because of all the different mouths to feed there. QJ, a boomer bust wide receiver 3. He needs to find the end zone. This week he did it. He'll still continue to be that kind of guy. And it was maybe a bit of a mirage early in the season, what we saw, that production from him. Allen down in the wide receiver 4 flex range. Gadsden, a strong mid-range tight end 1. And yeah, like Hampton, I'm very concerned. I hate when teams are like really cagey about injury information. And I know today Harbaugh came out and suggested that they're not going to see him. They're not going to open up his window until after the week 12 bye. And we don't even know, does that mean they're going to do it right away? Does that mean we're not going to see him until week 15, or we're not going to see him until the playoffs? Like, it's a very strange situation, and one that I am definitely worried about. So Marion Hampton, I would probably say total panic on as well.
Yeah, all fair points. I mentioned the Keenan Allen concerns yesterday with Chris Allen. I think that's where he's at this point. I kind of think it makes sense to save him for bigger games later in the season, not use him against the damn Titans for your fantasy matchups this week. I think it makes sense to kind of save him for later in the year. And yeah, Hampton, I think he'll probably be back after the week 12 bye, but we have no idea if that's definitely happening. So definitely concerned about that one as well. All right, so the Coping Corner update after this week. We added Keon, Coleman, Darnell, Mooney, Kenneth Walker, the Commanders offense, and Brian Thomas Jr. So the Coping Corner is pretty packed right now, which makes sense. It's about that time of the year where we accept where certain players are and we just try to adjust and move forward. All right, we're going to take our next break. When we come back, it's time to get into the Week 10 waiver wire selections with Justin Boone right after this. All right, we're back. It's time to get into the Week 10 waiver wire with Boone here. Every week, Boone goes position by position, offers some of his top pickups. Cannot stress this enough, though. He mentioned it in the last segment. As I say, we are reading again in 2025. There's going to be way more context available in the article about specifics, this, that, and the other, that we can't just sit here and break down the podcast, or we'd be doing a 5-hour show on the waiver wire, which, I don't know, sounds like not fun to me. So read the article, okay? We're reading again in 2025. You people out there are reading Justin Boone's waiver wire article every single week, or you better be. You better be. All right, let's get into it here. Let's go position by position, starting with our quarterbacks, Boone.
I'll even add this, Harmon, that if they're not reading, there's just lists of players as well and how I value them. So if you're looking for deeper pickups, you can go there. You don't even have to read. I don't want to make you read, but click on it and you'll go find some deeper pickups there. If you're in,
you do have to read to see the list.
Are already taken, yeah. But just so that people aren't worried that they need to go, read an essay or anything about the waiver wire. It's all broken down in there for you. So there's lots of names, no matter what type of league you're in. But let's start with quarterbacks here. And I'm going to name a couple guys that are at or just above that 50% rostered mark that I normally use. But I'm going to name them because, to tell you what, once you get past some of the other names, it gets pretty ugly. So we'll start off here. Joe Flacco is on bye, but we're going to have to talk about him after the games he's had recently. Sam Darnold going up against the Cardinals, but both him and Flacco are at that 50% rostered mark. JJ McCarthy, who I can't even believe we're talking about him, but we're going to, versus the Ravens in week 10. And then Marcus Mariota, who I alluded to earlier, that yes, even though we put that Commanders offense in the coping corner, Marcus Mariota is still somebody that you could consider as a streaming option and a guy who's going to have some decent weeks. So for Flacco, he's on bye. You can't play him this week, but he has been so good. I mean, multiple touchdowns in every game that he started for the Bengals. Top 7 fantasy quarterback, 3 straight weeks here. And schedule-wise, there is still a bunch of positive matchups coming up for this offense. So as long as things don't go off the rails, as long as we don't start getting like fights between the offense and the defense, because we saw the Bengals offense was pretty upset that defense couldn't get any stops. So this thing, there could be coaches fired. I don't know what's going to happen, but as long as it stays the way it is, as long as these guys are healthy, this is just a real fantasy offense. They're going to put up some big games like we've seen. Sam Darnold, he's played very well this year. We talked about the rushing attack earlier and how that struggled. The passing game really has not. And I mean, coming off, I would say a great game, but really a great first half, right? He threw 4 touchdowns, didn't have to do much in the second half. They blew out the Commanders in that game, but it goes back further, right? Over the last 8 weeks, Darnold's been a top 12 fantasy quarterback on a per game basis. He's top 20 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 outings. He's doing it without the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell, which I thought wasn't going to be possible, but Clint Kubiak has him playing very well. And it's not just Jackson Smith and Jigba. It's Torrey Horton, some of these young guys who are coming on. And Torrey Horton, we're going to talk about in a second here, but the tight ends, AJ Barner, Elijah Arroyo, they have other young talent that is emerging in this offense that could potentially make them even better in the passing attack as the season goes along. So no reason that he can't keep this going. Cardinals are going to be on a short week too. It's going to be a quick turnaround for them in week 10. So it's another reason to play Darnold. And then we get to the heart of it. JJ McCarthy, 29% rostered. And I feel like Harmon's just going to laugh his way through this one. But, he starts off this game very hot. He comes out of this game. He's playing very well. The second half, a lot more volatile, but he does lead them to the win. He does what was necessary, and that's going to at least keep him under center moving forward here for a while. Now, he's finished as the QB 11 overall in week 1. He currently sits as the QB 12, which is Monday Night Football left to go here. So there's a chance. I mean, he's probably going to get pushed down, so he won't be a QB 1 in both of those games, but those are decent fantasy outings. He has 3 touchdowns in 2 of those 3 games that he's started so far. 6 touchdowns total, 4 passing, 2 rushing. He's getting it done with his legs. That's given a little bit of boost to his fantasy value as well. We know the weapons that he has. I think you got to be excited about him as a streamer and a guy that could potentially still sneak into the low-end QB1 range in some weeks, but we'll hear what Harmon has to say about that in a minute. And then Marcus Mariota, like I said, can give you a fraction of what Jaden Daniels does, maybe 70% or so. In some positive matchups, he's going to be able to get into your lineup. He can run the ball a little bit. We know how valuable that is for fantasy. So all of those things together make those guys the top pickups this week. If you go any further than that, it is going to be very, very risky. So you're going to want to focus on these 4 names, Harmon.
God, yeah. My Jaden Daniels teams are desperately hoping I can get Joe Flacco, who leads the NFL in dropbacks over the last 4 months. He just basically is Joe Burrow. He's like, from a fantasy perspective, that's who he is. It's insane to say, but that's the reality of the situation. Yeah, McCarthy, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I could possibly put him in my fantasy lineup and feel great about it, but I understand where you're coming from on this one.
It's a streamer option, right? Like when we're talking about fab bids, it's like a 1%. It's you're not bidding much. You're just picking them up because you need to, because there's no other options. And to see, like you said, like he is not just what he is right now. He's a player that has not played very much in the NFL. So maybe we'll see some improvement as the season goes along. If you're looking for like that guy to just throw out there this week that you might have a little bit more confidence in, it's probably Mariota, right? Like in his last 5 games where he's played more than 50% of the snaps for the Commanders, he's averaged 18.7 fantasy points per game. He's finished as a top 10 quarterback 3 times in those 5 games. So we know that he can get it done even with all the struggles of that Washington offense. So if you need the guy for this week, it's probably Mariota. If you need the guy long-term and you're looking for a little more upside, I think it would be McCarthy.
All right, let's get to running backs here. What do we got this week?
It's not a very exciting week for running backs, to be honest. Like Trey Benson's up at the 59% mark, so he's way over that 50% mark. But I do feel the need to mention him because he's available in 41% of leagues. So at some point, he is going to come back from IR. So he's somebody that people should at least consider. I think he could be an RB2 for your lineups. Tajay Spears, obviously here. These are names that we've talked about many times. Isaiah Davis on the Jets, Dylan Sampson on the Browns, and Tank Bigsby on the Eagles. And with Spears, I don't think we have to spend much time talking about him because I've gone over him a bunch of times, but he's outproduced Tony Pollard in 3 of their last 4 games. He's outsnapped Pollard in 2 of those 4. And there is a chance, and depending when people are listening to this, there is a chance that Pollard could get traded before the deadline. And if that happens, that could completely unlock Spears. And we saw him last year in the fantasy playoffs put up really, really good numbers. So he has that kind of upside in this offense. It's been tough for him to get there. Obviously, with Pollard out there as well, it's tough to get there. But we could see Pollard moved out of the way, or we just could see the team turn to Spears more down the stretch because Pollard hasn't been that effective this season. Isaiah Davis, another guy that I've highlighted everywhere because of the chance that Breece Hall could get moved. We don't know if that's going to happen or not, but Davis is a guy to hold on to in hopes that he could potentially become the starting running back for the Jets if Breece Hall goes somewhere else before the deadline. So keep him in mind. And the last time we saw him out there before the bye, he had over 100 scrimmage yards in that game against the Bengals. So that gives you some hope that he could produce if he gets into that job. Dylan Sampson. Now we're going to track a couple injuries here this week. One is going to be Quinshon Judkins on the Browns. The other is going to be Saquon Barkley on the Eagles. And that's why I'm talking about Sampson and Bigsby here. Quinshon Judkins dealing with an AC joint sprain. Coming back from the bye, he was out at practice today. It's still early in the week, so we're going to watch to see if he's practicing limited, if he gets up to full practices. Seems like he's probably going to be able to play this week, but just in case, you go pick up Sampson and you hold on to him in case there's a chance that he gets a start this week. And Bigsby, similar situation, Saquon Barkley with a groin issue. We saw Barkley say that it wasn't that big of a deal. I think Ian Rappaport had a tweet about that it's not something significant, but another one we're going to monitor. And regardless, Tank Bigsby, the last game, he came out, he showed he is the number 2 back in that Eagles backfield. So if something ever happens to Saquon Barkley, Tank Bigsby would have a lot of value. There's a reason they traded for him. Took a little while for him to get going, but he is the guy to roster behind Saquon Barkley now.
Yeah, and that in and of itself makes him somebody to, especially if you're a contending team, right? Like you've got a good record, you've got good depth. You can say goodbye to one of your backups and just stash Tank Bigsby because he looked great. And I think Tank Bigsby's a good back. Like he's not terrible. He didn't last on this Jaguars roster, but he brings some explosiveness to him. So I do think he's somebody that is a great stash candidate. Just getting the information that he is the number 2 is really powerful here. For Dylan Sampson, same thing. He's the stash guy on this team. Kevin Stefanski handed off play calling duties, which is the second time in 2 years that he's done that. Tommy Reese now is going to call plays. I don't know that that means anything for this Browns offense, but it's not a good sign with where things are going. Dylan Gabriel is going to remain the starter for now. The Browns are circling the drain. So I don't even know if Quinshon Judkins is not out there. I don't even know if I'm like trying to start many Browns on my fantasy team, although Cedric Tillman is coming back off IR. So that is at least something to note. But yeah, Sampson is at least the guy we know is the number 2 behind Judkins.
Well, if you think back to that first game before we saw Judkins out there with the team, Sampson had 20 touches in that game, had 93 scrimmage yards. That was back in the opener. So he can produce. A lot of that came through the air, but that's part of his game, right? So I think you make a really good point as well about as we get past bye weeks, you do want to start to fill up those bench spots with these high upside backup running backs. That is the best spot. That is the best position to kind of take these guys, put them on your bench, and if an injury happens, all of a sudden you see their value blow up. So I think it's good that you brought that up.
All right, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll run through wide receivers and tight ends you can add off the waiver wire right after this. All right, we're back. We're continuing to run through the waiver wire here with Boone. And I got to say, that running back section lacked a little bit of juice. This wide receiver group, though, there's some pretty interesting names here. So we've got 4 to go through, Boone. Take us through these guys.
All right, so the first one, Torrey Horton, he's going against the Cardinals. Parker Washington at the Texans. Tez Johnson versus the Patriots. Don't forget about him coming off a bye. And then Alec Pierce versus the Falcons. Really excited to talk about him. But let's start with Horton. I mean, just a monster game from him this week. Cooper Kupp, sideline. It was a heel and a hamstring injury. And you see Horton go off with the opportunity, right? 4 grabs, 48 yards. 2 touchdowns. I saw Harmon tweeting about him a ton. I've written him up in the deep stashes column before, so hopefully people were all over this one. He's now found the end zone 5 times in his first 8 contests, and that's mostly being a part-time player in those games. It wasn't always like this week where I think he played over 70% of the snaps. So we'll see how fast Kupp can get back out on the field here, but he is a bit of an older player, right? 32 years old. And we'll see, is this just the beginning of possibly Horton taking over and moving ahead of him in the pecking order in this passing attack? I think that would make a lot of sense. I think he brings more juice now, a strong route runner, a guy that's just at a different stage of his career than Cooper Kupp is. So let's see Horton continue to get more opportunity. I think he's a wide receiver 3 flex option moving forward. Parker Washington, I mean, prior to week 9, like you had Travis Hunter placed on IR. You had Tim Patrick ruled out with a groin injury. And then, I mean, the situation, it's way, way worse. Brian Thomas Jr. leaves the game with an ankle injury. Diami Brown leaves with a concussion. Like, the receiver room is devastated now. The last man standing is Washington, and there's a chance moving forward now he could be the number 1 receiver in week 10 if BTJ can't get out there. And to his credit for Washington, I mean, he excelled here. 8 passes that he caught for 90 yards. He now has 12 grabs, 142 yards, and 19 targets over the last 2 games. There's still a lot to be sorted out on the injury front, so this is one where people are going to have to pay attention all week long. Check my rankings. I'm sure we'll talk about it on the show. Keep an eye on Parker Washington and this Jags receiving core, but right now it looks like he might be the top guy, so he would be a wide receiver 3 flex option there. Tez Johnson, I mean, another situation where you have a team coming up by, a guy that might be a little bit forgotten here, but we don't know when Chris Godwin's going to return. Mike Evans is going to be out for a while here. He's not coming back anytime soon. So it's Emeka Egbuka, and then who else is going to step up? And Johnson so far has been that guy, at least 40 yards in 4 straight games, touchdowns in 2 of his last 3. The volume has been there too, 15 targets over his last 2 outings. So keep him in mind. You wouldn't necessarily think with the body type he has that he would be a volume guy, but he is getting enough volume. He's also in the wide receiver 3 flex range. And then Alec Pierce, this is the one that I want to hear what Harmon has to say about, because he's been shockingly good this season. He doesn't get talked up enough either, right? If you look at his last 6 games, He's gone for 67 yards or more 5 different times. In his last 3, here are the stat lines: 5 for 98, 2 for 69, and then this week, 6 for 115. He's seen double-digit targets in 2 of those last 3 outings. There's just so much to like about his production. And if you want a way to invest in this Colts attack and a way to do it very, very cheaply, I think Alec Pierce is the way to do it, right? He's available in 74% of leagues right now. He's another guy that's in that wide receiver 3 flex range. So it is a packed group. And that's why I kept mentioning throughout the show when we were talking about certain receivers, there's just so many of these guys that you can get off the waiver wire and plug right into your lineup, Harmon, that you don't need to hold on to some of those guys that you've been waiting on for a while who just aren't producing, because you can go get some of these guys that are.
Oh, yeah, for real. Like the Darnell Mooney types versus pretty much all of these guys to different degrees.
Right?
Give me a break. Where do you think Alec Pierce ranks in yards per game among wide receivers this season?
Oh, I have no idea. Hit me.
12th. He's 12th among wide receivers in yards per game. 71.6. He's ahead of his teammate Michael Pittman. He's obviously ahead of Josh Downs, who's been kind of their red zone answer the last few. Like he's been getting a bunch of those like looks, which has been great for him. That's like a nice role for him to have. But Alec Pierce has been like legit good, and I've been talking about this for a few weeks now. I did a breakdown on my YouTube channel about this. He has evolved his game. He is not just a sacrificial X shot player. He's running big in breaking routes. He's been smoking guys on out routes the last couple of weeks. So he's a legit player. It was the right couple matchups these last 2 weeks, which is why I've been highlighting him so much. Titans, Steelers, those were total smash spots. So I'm not saying that Alec Pierce is going to be a consistent player for you. It will not shock me if in 2 weeks he's averaging 50 yards per game, not 70 yards per game, because he has a couple duds here and there. But you know the ceiling is real. I'm really glad you highlighted him, because his rostership percentage is like stupid. And I feel like I've been talking about him on FFL, Bold Predictions, this show, and we gotta pump these numbers up, people. He's 12th in yards per game. He can't be like sub 30% rostered. Enough already. Torrey Horton is awesome. I talked about him obviously on the solo recap show last night, Boone, but after going back and charting the game this morning, I come away even more convinced that the Seahawks cannot put him back on the shelf, that it's going to be really difficult to put that game back in the bottle, because not only is he good and wins against man coverage and is the exact type of player that I thought he'd be as a prospect, because he is also their best on ball like player besides JSN and can run real routes. Cooper Kupp's just not that guy at this point. He allows them to move JSN around. He allows them to do what they did last night, like put him in the backfield for a create a touch type situation. So to me, we talk about these second half of the season rookie year risers. Why not Torrey Horton? You know?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It's somebody who's so exciting in an offense, a passing attack at least, that is pretty exciting this year. It's in the exact kind of spot you want to invest in. And yeah, he's the top pickup. He is the picture on my waiver wire column. He's in the headline this week. He's the guy to go and get. I mean, some of those other guys I mentioned, like a Trey Benson, who's way over the 50% mark, they would be the number one guy, but they're rostered in too many leagues to really qualify. So yeah, in terms of guys who are available in a lot of leagues, and Torrey Horton is available almost everywhere still, this is the guy that you want to go out and get and invest in. Shall we move to tight ends, Harmon? Should we move on, or do you want to talk more about the receivers?
Real quick, just on Parker Washington, I think last week is not just an opportunity-based fluke. He was in the slot on 61% of the passing plays against this Raiders team. That is by far a season high for him. He had never been higher than 48% in any other game. And I know they're trying to get Travis Hunter activated as that slot receiver, so I understand that part of it. But to me, like, just look at him from a dimensions standpoint. He's 5'10", 204. He is not an outside receiver. Like, in different games this season, he's had a 20 air yard per target mark. He's not like an outside deep threat, and I think that's why the drop numbers had been higher for him at times. He's one of these Jags receivers that has had drop issues this year, but he's also a guy that, again, even if there have been drops, he's not shied away from contact like some of these other players here. So I think there's some staying power to Parker Washington, who was like a day 3 prospect I really liked coming into the league as kind of I called him a little bit of like a Bud Light Golden Tate type of player. And I think we finally saw him in a role that looked a little bit more like that this past week than we'd seen previously. All of his production Again, like that slot stuff, that's much more sustainable for him.
Yeah, he's had some moments even before this year. It isn't like he's doing this out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
There were times when Christian Kirk was there and Christian Kirk got hurt and Parker Washington stepped in and actually had some decent games. So he's a guy that's shown on a limited basis in the past, and now he's going to get a chance to see what he can do and maybe more of a feature role out of necessity. And yet so far it's looking pretty good here. All right, let's go to tight ends here. I want to talk about a few of them. We'll start with Harold Fannin Jr., who I've talked about a ton of times. Colston Loveland, he'll be versus the Giants. He's coming off that big game. Can he do it again? Theo Johnson at the Bears, and then Juwan Johnson at the Panthers. And for Harold Fannin Jr., I'll mention him here. He's just been like a mainstay in the waiver wire column, so I don't want to talk too much about it. But there's a chance
like
that David Njoku could
week.
Right? Like for some reason, he's not over the 50% rostered mark, so I have to keep mentioning him. But there's a chance he's another one of these situations where we might see David Njoku get traded. The latest reports about it make it seem like he's probably going to stay in Cleveland. But even with Njoku there as his teammate, Harold Fannin in the conversation as a low-end tight end 1, a high-end tight end 2. He's been pretty productive here. And in one spot where I lost Tucker Kraft in one of the office leagues for Yahoo, Harmon, today I did the move where I went out and dropped a bench player and I picked up David Njoku, who is still a free agent today because he hasn't played because he's on bye this week. So just trying to find anything to fill that Tucker Kraft size hole in my heart. Nothing can actually do it. Maybe Colston Loveland could do it for some people though, because Colston Loveland, we've talked about a bunch of different rookies stepping up this year. He's the latest one to do it. Just a huge eruption spot for him here. Caught 6 balls, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns, catches that game-winning 58-yard score. It was against the Bengals. It was a great matchup. All of those things have to be factored in. He had more yards in this game than he had in his previous 6 games. So that tells you just how huge this performance was for him. But Cole Kmet forced to leave this game. So will Cole Kmet be able to play next week? I believe he's in concussion protocol. Normally guys miss 1 week. So matchup with the Giants could be another good spot for Colston Loveland. And just remember, this guy was a first-round pick. This is the guy they want involved in the offense. Ben Johnson is going to find ways to get him the ball. It won't always be 100 yards, but I think he's a guy that definitely is a priority add this week at tight end and somebody that could get in that mix in that low-end tight end 1, high-end tight end 2 range. Theo Johnson, now we're talking more about streamers. He's more of like a touchdown or bust streamer, but 5 touchdowns in his last 6 games. You know, all the injuries to the pass catchers in this offense, they need him to be involved. Juwan Johnson, he had that strong stretch early in the season, then was injured for a little bit. Now having another strong stretch here. 5 for 79, 5 for 53, and then this week, 31 yards and a touchdown. So 3 straight pretty good performances from him. That's enough to get him back in the tight end 2 streamer mix. And then I have my deep stash, and I'll just mention him here because it's also a tight end here, Harmon. Luke Musgrave, the man who is actually going to fill in for Tucker Kraft in Green Bay. Now, not the same player, doesn't have the same yak ability. He's more of like an explosive guy, a guy who can actually make some plays downfield as well in an offense where if you're not Tucker Kraft, are you going to get the ball that often at tight end, or are they going to continue to spread the ball around? I think that's probably what's going to happen here. So I'm not looking at Musgrave as anything more than a tight end 2 streamer type, but he's also on the radar as a guy that you could pick up and put into your lineup if you need some help at tight end this week.
Yeah, he's not nearly the blocker that Tucker Kraft is, just the overall physical player. So that's why Kraft, who was drafted after Luke Musgrave, has actually usurped him as the starting tight end here. But yeah, I think there's some chance for Musgrave. He would be the deepest play here, as you mentioned, for sure. I think I would rank them. It would be Fannin to me would be number 1 if I'm trying to replace Tucker Kraft, which I am in several leagues. It would be Fannin number 1. It would be then Colston Loveland number 2. Juwan Johnson, Theo Johnson, Luke Musgrave. God, I've just remembered the league that one of the leagues I have Tucker Kraft. I actually had a Rondé Gadsden like stashed at the beginning of the season and dropped him for some goofball. But luckily I picked up Colston. I picked up Colston Loveland and I started him in the flex spot this past week. So there's actually that, which is nice. But all right. Those are the tight end pickups this week. There's at least some options there if you, like us, are reeling from the Tucker Kraft injury. Boone, hell of a show, buddy. This was absolutely packed. The people show, tell them they should go read your waiver wire content for even more.
Waiver wire column goes up every Monday. I update it after Monday Night Football if anything happens of note. So we'll be watching tonight to see if it does. But definitely go read the column because it goes way, way deeper than the guys we talked about today.
Yes, and let's hope that some of those guys that we need who shall remain nameless crush it on Monday Night Football. so that I can say I survived both of my Rome Odunze zeros. Let's just say, for my personal well-being, let's hope that happens. For now, that is going to do it for today's show. Ray Garvin joins me tomorrow for a special trade deadline edition of the show. We're, of course, going to have our usual data dump content, but we will start the show reacting to any and all of the trades that happen and that could impact your fantasy lineup. That's going to be live 5 p.m. Eastern on YouTube right here, so be sure to like and subscribe. Trade deadline happens. We're going to be right here live right after it. Until then, we are out.